The wedding on Parangtritis beach was alive with music and laughter. Then the bride stopped dancing, her eyes fixed on the glowing horizon. A soft, ancient voice called her name from the waves. Before anyone could stop her, she stepped into the dark sea, and the water swallowed her whole.
If you like true stories like this, like and subscribe now.
The morning after the wedding, Parangtritis beach was unrecognizable. The once vibrant shoreline was littered with overturned chairs, broken lanterns, and scraps of white fabric tangled in the wet sand. The smell of brine hung heavy in the air, mixed with a faint aroma of burnt coconut husks from the abandoned feast. No one spoke above a whisper. The villagers who had come to help stood with grim faces, scanning the restless waves as if the sea might return what it had taken. But the Southern Sea was known for keeping its treasures and its victims. Aditya had not slept. His eyes were bloodshot, his hair matted with seawater from his desperate swim into the night. He kept replaying the moment in his mind, her fingers slipping from his, her veil floating like a ghost above the foam. He swore he had seen another figure in the water, tall and regal, with hair like seaweed and a gown that shimmered green beneath the moonlight. But when he told the others, they exchanged uneasy glances, unwilling to confirm what they too had heard in the wind. A woman's laughter, low and mocking. By midday, the search began in earnest. Men from the village waded chest-deep into the churning surf, while others took small fishing boats beyond the reef. Every time a wave broke, they hoped for a glimpse of white fabric or pale skin. Instead, they found offerings: garlands of wilted jasmine, lengths of silk, and small bronze mirrors half buried in the sand. The elders recognized them immediately. They were gifts, tributes, meant for the Queen of the Southern Sea. And to find them scattered on the shore meant only one thing: she had claimed another soul. Aditya's mother, Sari, tried to convince him to leave the search to the others. Her hands trembled as she clutched the edge of his shirt, her voice breaking with fear. "If she's taken her," she whispered, "there is no bringing her back. Not unless—" She stopped herself, glancing toward the cliffside where an old wooden hut leaned against the wind. Inside that hut lived Mbal Laris, a blind woman with salt white hair, said to have once served in the queen's court beneath the waves. But no one went to her unless they were desperate and foolish. As dusk approached, the sea grew wilder, as if angered by their intrusion. Waves slammed into the shore, sending spray high into the air. The fishing boats returned one by one, empty-handed, the crews pale and silent. The last boat to arrive brought with it something strange, a soaked length of green silk embroidered with patterns that shimmered like fish scales. It smelled faintly of jasmine and salt, and when Aditya touched it, a chill ran through his body so deep he could barely breathe. The fabric felt alive, pulsing faintly, as if it still belonged to the one who wore it. That night, Aditya made his decision. He could not eat, could not rest, could not live with the image of her disappearing into the dark water. If the Queen of the Southern Sea had taken his bride, then he would go to the one person who might know how to find her. The path to Mbal Laris's hut was steep and treacherous, lit only by the pale glow of the moon. The sound of the waves followed him up the cliffside, not as a distant roar, but as a whispering chorus speaking words he almost understood, words that made his heart race and his skin crawl. The hut clung to the cliff like a stubborn barnacle, its wooden planks warped and bleached by years of salt and wind. Aditya stood at the threshold, unsure if he should knock or simply call out. The only sound was the deep crash of waves below and the faint creak of the door swaying in the night breeze. When he finally pushed it open, the scent of dried seaweed and old incense rushed out to meet him. Shadows clung to the walls, and in the far corner sat Mbal Laris, her milky eyes fixed in his direction though she could not see. A small oil lamp flickered beside her, casting her face in shifting orange light. "You came because the sea has taken something from you," she said before he could speak. Her voice was brittle, like the snapping of dry reeds. Aditya froze, startled by her certainty. She gestured for him to sit on a woven mat across from her. As he lowered himself, he noticed strange objects scattered around the room, small jars of black sand, coral fragments, and shells painted with symbols. Hanging from the low rafters were strings of fish bones that rattled softly whenever the wind found its way inside. Every part of this place felt alive, as if the sea itself had reached into it. Aditya told her everything about the wedding, the voice, and the waves, and the green silk that now lay in his room. And Bahlaras listened without interruption, her expression unreadable. When he finished, she leaned closer, the lamplight catching the deep grooves in her face. "You saw her," she whispered. "The queen herself. Few live to tell that. She does not take what is not hers to claim." Her words were heavy, but Aditya's desperation outweighed his fear. "How do I get her back?" he asked, his voice cracking. And Bahlaras shook her head slowly, as though speaking to a child who could not yet grasp the truth. "To bargain with the queen, you must enter her court beneath the waves. But the path is not of this world, and the living are not meant to survive there." She reached for a small wooden box and opened it, revealing a silver coin worn smooth with age. On one side was the carved image of a crowned woman, on the other an unfamiliar script that shimmered like fish scales when the light touched it. "This is your key, but the toll you pay is not in gold, it is what you are willing to lose." She slid the coin toward him, her hand trembling slightly. Aditya picked it up, feeling its unnatural chill seep into his skin. "What do you mean?" he asked, but Bahlaras only smiled, her white eyes unblinking. "You will understand when the waves open for you," she said. Then she gave him instructions. He must go to the shoreline alone at the exact moment the moon reached its highest point, and place the coin in the water without speaking a word. If she wishes to see you, she will send for you. If she does not, you will simply vanish and no one will ever find you. The calmness in her voice made the words even more terrifying. As Aditya left the hut, the wind along the cliff had grown colder, sharper, carrying with it the faintest trace of jasmine. The moon was already climbing toward its peak, its pale light turning the waves below into shifting silver. He gripped the coin tightly in his fist, his heart pounding with a mix of dread and resolve. Somewhere beyond the horizon, in a realm no mortal was meant to enter, the queen of the southern sea was waiting. And if he was to follow Bahlaras' instructions, he only had hours left before the tide and fate claimed him as well.
The beach was empty when Aditya arrived, save for the whispering tide and the endless stretch of black sand gleaming under the moon. The oil lamps from the village were distant specks of gold far behind him, offering no comfort. In his hand, the silver coin was cold enough to numb his fingers. Bahlaras' words rang in his ears. "Do not speak. Do not hesitate." He walked to where the waves licked at his feet, the water shockingly cold, as though it came from another world. The scent of jasmine lingered, faint but insistent, pulling him forward like an unseen hand. The moon hung directly above, round and merciless, bathing the sea in ghostly light. Aditya knelt and placed the coin into the water. For a moment, nothing happened, only the hiss of retreating foam. Then, the coin didn't sink. It hovered just beneath the surface, spinning slowly as if caught in an unseen whirlpool. The water around it began to glow with a pale green light stretching outward in veins that pulsed like living things. Aditya's chest tightened. Every instinct told him to run, but his feet rooted deeper into the wet sand. The sea was no longer retreating. It was waiting. A wave rose before him, not a crashing wall of water, but a perfectly smooth arch, tall enough to blot out the moon. Beneath its translucent surface, shadows moved, long, graceful shapes with hair drifting like kelp. A figure stepped forward within the water, her gown flowing as if the sea itself had woven it. Her eyes shone brighter than the moon, fixed directly on him. She extended a hand, and though she was still several steps away, he felt her fingers brush against his mind, a cold, silken touch that spoke without words, "Come." The wave did not break. Instead, it opened. The water parted down the middle, revealing a dark passage that sloped downward into the depths. The air around him grew heavy, thick with moisture that clung to his skin like a second layer. Without realizing it, Aditya stepped forward, the sand sucking at his heels as if reluctant to let him go. He passed to the point where the water should have closed over his head, but it didn't. Instead, he found himself walking beneath the ocean's skin, a tunnel of swirling currents lit by the faint green glow of unseen creatures. The deeper he went, the quieter the world became. The sound of waves vanished, replaced by the muted hum of the sea's heartbeat. Strange fish with translucent bodies drifted alongside him, their eyes black and unblinking. In the distance, enormous shapes moved slowly, their forms too vast to comprehend, each one accompanied by a trail of bioluminescent sparks. The tunnel floor was not sand, but smooth stone engraved with patterns that seemed to shift when he wasn't looking. The further he walked, the more the air thinned, yet he felt no urge to breathe, as if the sea had already claimed his lungs. At last, the passage opened into a vast chamber beneath the waves. Pillars of coral spiraled toward a ceiling lost in darkness, and schools of silverfish swam in perfect circles above, casting reflections that danced along the walls. At the center of it all stood the throne carved from black stone, draped in fabrics that shimmered like liquid emerald. Upon it sat the queen of the southern sea, her presence so commanding that he could not look directly at her face without feeling his heart falter. She smiled, not with warmth, but with a promise of a game whose rules only she knew. And then she spoke his name, though he had never given it to her.
Her voice was not a sound, but a vibration that rippled through the water and into his bones. When she spoke his name, it was drawn out like the pulling of a tide, slow, deliberate, and irresistible. Aditya tried to speak, but the words caught in his throat, strangled by awe and fear. The queen leaned forward on her throne, and her gown shifted like living currents around her. Pearls and shards of seashells adorned her hair, but it was her eyes, twin whirlpools of green and black, that held him in place, as though any attempt to look away would drag him into their depths. "You came into my realm with the coin," she said, her lips barely moving. "Few dare, fewer return." Her gaze flickered to the silver token that now lay weightless in the water beside him. "You seek the one I took." She didn't phrase it as a question. She already knew. Aditya forced himself to nod. His voice finally emerged, rough and low. "She's my wife. I want her back." The queen's lips curved into something that might have been a smile, but it carried no warmth, only a predator's curiosity. "Do you even know what you ask of me, mortal?" Aditya clenched his fists. "I don't care what it takes." The queen rose from her throne with a fluidity that made it impossible to tell where her gown ended and the sea began. She circled him slowly, the currents following her like obedient pets. "Your bride wore white," she said softly. "She danced beneath the moon. But when the wind shifted, she heard my call. That means she is mine." Her hand drifted past his face, not touching, yet cold seeped into his skin. "To return what is mine, you must give me something greater." He swallowed hard. "What do you want?"
The queen stopped before him, studying his face with an expression both amused and calculating. "Your memories," she said at last. "Not all of them, just the ones of her. Every smile, every touch, every night spent beside her. I will take them and she will be free to return, but to you she will be a stranger." Her voice was silk over steel. "This is the price for my mercy." Aditya's breath caught. To save her life, he would have to erase the love that brought him here. The water around them darkened, the coral pillars casting long shadows as if the sea itself awaited his answer. Aditya's mind screamed in protest, but his heart was torn. If he refused, his wife would remain here, forever part of the queen's domain. If he agreed, she might live, but their love would die. The queen's lips narrowed, reading the turmoil within him. "You think there is another way?" she asked, almost mockingly. "There is, but it is far more dangerous, and you will likely not survive it. Still, it would let you keep your memories, if you succeed." Aditya stepped closer, his voice steadier now. "Tell me." The queen's smile widened, revealing teeth too sharp to be human. She gestured toward a dark chasm at the edge of the chamber where the water seemed to vanish into nothingness. "Beyond lies the Mao of Tanjong Lair. There sleeps something older than me, a creature I have bound in chains for centuries. Bring me its heart, and I will give you back your bride without taking your memories." Her voice lowered to a whisper, "But be warned, its chains are breaking, and it has been waiting for someone just like you."
The chasm yawned before him like the mouth of some ancient beast, its edges jagged with black coral that pulsed faintly, as if alive. From within, a slow current breathed in and out, carrying with it a smell unlike anything he had known. A mix of rusted metal, rotting kelp, and something older, something that made his skin prickle. Aditya hesitated at the threshold. Behind him, the queen watched with the stillness of a predator, her hands resting lightly on the arms of her throne. "Go," she said, the word curling through the water like smoke. "Every heartbeat you waste brings your bride closer to forgetting you." Aditya stepped forward, the seafloor tilting steeply downward. The light from the queen's chamber faded behind him, swallowed by a darkness so complete it seemed to have weight. Bioluminescent worms clung to the walls, casting weak, sickly glows that barely illuminated his path. He could no longer tell if he was walking or sinking. Strange shapes moved beyond the glow, too fast to be fish, too large to be safe. Several times he felt something brush against his arm or leg, but when he turned, nothing was there except the slow swirl of silt. The deeper he descended, the louder the sound became. At first it was just a low thrum, but it soon grew into a deep, steady heartbeat, echoing through the stone and into his chest. Each beat felt heavier than the last, as though the entire ocean pulsed in time with it. The walls here were covered in markings, spirals, jagged lines, and shapes that resembled eyes. Some of those eyes blinked, following his movements. He forced himself not to look for too long. He had the creeping sense that if he did, the walls would start whispering back. The passage narrowed until he had to press sideways to continue, his shoulders scraping against the stone. Then, without warning, the walls dropped away, and he stood on the edge of a vast underwater abyss. A broken chain thicker than a tree trunk lay across the chasm, disappearing into the gloom. Each link was encrusted with barnacles and coral, but it still shimmered faintly with an unnatural silver light. Far below, something stirred. The heartbeat grew louder, now joined by the sound of slow, dragging breaths, each one rattling the water like a distant storm. A flicker of movement to his left caught his eye.
from the darkness emerged creatures unlike any he had seen. Elongated, eel-like bodies with human faces twisted into expressions of hunger. Their skin was pale and stretched tight, their eyes sunken but glowing faintly yellow. They swam in slow, deliberate circles around him, their mouths opening to reveal rows of needle-like teeth. One of them drifted closer, its lips peeling back into something like a grin. Aditya reached instinctively for the small dagger Mbaladas had slipped into his belt before he left, though he wasn't sure it would be enough. The eel-faced things didn't attack immediately. Instead, they seemed to herd him, their movements tightening into a spiral that pushed him closer to the broken chain. Far in the depths, a faint glow began to rise, not the pale green of the Queen's court, but a molten red, pulsing in time with that impossible heartbeat. And then he heard it, not with his ears, but deep inside his mind, a voice, low and ancient, whispering his name.
The red glow grew stronger as Aditya descended, wrapping the abyss in a hellish light. The water thickened, clinging to his skin like oil, slowing every movement. The heartbeat was no longer distant. It thundered in his skull, vibrating through his bones. As the glow expanded, he began to make out the shape of the creature. At first, he thought it was a mountain of stone bound in silver chains. But then it shifted, and an eye, larger than his entire body, rolled toward him, its surface like molten gold fractured by blackened veins. The weight of that gaze nearly crushed his will. The chains that bound it stretched in every direction. Some snapped, others frayed to the thickness of a thread. Around its body were jagged fins like the wings of some primeval leviathan, each one etched with runes that pulsed faintly, fighting against the red glow. Its mouth was partially open, revealing teeth the size of temple pillars, yet the voice that filled Aditya's head was calm, deliberate, and disarmingly human. "You are not hers yet." The words reverberated through the water, bypassing sound entirely. "But you soon will be, unless you free me." Aditya gripped the dagger tighter, though he knew it would be useless against something like this. "Why would I free you?" he demanded, his voice trembling in the water. The creature shifted again, and the movement stirred a current so strong it almost swept him away. "Because you seek your bride, I can give her back, whole, untouched, with every memory still in her heart." The voice deepened, dripping with temptation. "But only if you sever the last of these chains. One cut, that is all." The molten eye blinked slowly, its glow intensifying. "She has lied to you, human. I have not." The words coiled in his mind, and with them came flashes, visions, or perhaps memories not his own. He saw the Queen of the Southern Sea standing at the edge of this abyss centuries ago, her gown a storm of emerald silk. He saw her driving the final chain into the creature's flesh, binding it with a smile that didn't reach her eyes. And he saw other men, hundreds of them, descending here as he had, their bodies floating lifeless in the dark when they failed to leave. His heart pounded harder, and for a moment he couldn't tell if it was his heartbeat or the monster's. The eel-faced creatures circled closer, their eyes fixed not on Aditya, but on the chained being. Their movements agitated. They hissed in unison, as if warning him. One darted forward, snapping its needle-filled jaws near his hand, forcing him to pull back. The molten eye turned toward them, and the water seemed to boil. The eel-faced ones recoiled instantly, scattering into the shadows. "They serve her," the voice said. "They fear me. That is why you can trust me, human. Break my chain, and she will never touch you or your bride again." Aditya hovered in the water, his mind torn in two. Mbala Ross had warned him never to trust the Queen,
but she had not said anything about what she kept locked beneath the waves. The dagger in his hand felt heavier now, its silver blade glinting faintly in the red light. Behind him, the darkness pressed closer, and far above, the Queen's court was just a memory. Before him, the final chain pulsed, each beat syncing with his heart. The creature's voice grew softer, almost pleading. "Choose quickly, for she is watching us both."
Aditya's grip tightened on the dagger until his knuckles ached. The molten eye loomed before him, unblinking, waiting. Every part of his body screamed to make a choice, yet his thoughts churned like a whirlpool. If he struck the chain, he might unleash something far worse than the Queen, a power bound for centuries for a reason. But if he turned away, he would have to face her again, empty-handed, and the price she demanded would be his love itself. The water felt colder now, biting through his skin, as though the ocean knew a decision was about to be made. Above him, in the black void beyond the abyss, a shimmer of green light appeared. It swirled slowly, resolving into a figure, tall, regal, her gown flowing as if carried by an invisible tide. The Queen's voice slid into his thoughts like a blade through silk. "You disappoint me, Aditya." The molten eye narrowed, and the deep voice rumbled through the water. "She is lying. You are here because she cannot take from me what she wants." The Queen tilted her head, her eyes never leaving his. "Strike the chain, and your bride will curse you for what follows. Leave now, and she will live in your arms again by nightfall." The two voices collided in his mind, each pulling at the fragile threads of his resolve. His chest tightened, his breath shallow. Memories of Lastari flashed before him, her laughter in the marketplace, the way her hand fit into his, the warmth of her cheek against his at night. But another thought wormed its way in. If she returned only because the Queen allowed it, would she ever truly be free? The molten eye glowed brighter, and the deep voice whispered, "One cut, and she will be yours without her chains or mine." The Queen's presence thickened the water, her gown drifting closer to him as though reaching for his heart. "Look at me," she commanded. Against his will, his gaze locked onto hers. Her eyes swirled like storms, and for a heartbeat, he felt the pull that had taken Lastari. His lungs burned, and he realized he was forgetting why he had come here at all. The creature's voice roared through his mind, shaking the trance apart. "Now!" In the same instant, the Queen's smile sharpened, her hand lifting toward him. The dagger felt as though it weighed the world. Aditya's body moved before his mind caught up. He plunged downward toward the last chain, the red light exploding around him. The Queen's voice turned to a shriek, and the water convulsed as if the entire sea had come alive. The molten eye flared brilliantly, and a deep vibration shuddered through the abyss. His dagger struck, biting into the silver link. It resisted at first, humming like a living thing, but then a deafening barack split the water. The chain fell away, vanishing into the depths. The creature's body shifted, its fins spreading wide, shaking loose clouds of silt that had lain undisturbed for centuries. The red glow swelled until it was blinding, swallowing both the Queen's form and the last glimmers of the abyss. The voice boomed one final time, echoing in every corner of his skull. "You have chosen, mortal. Now the sea will remember your name." Then the water exploded into chaos, currents tearing at him, unseen hands dragging him upward, and somewhere in the distance the Queen's furious scream. The ocean convulsed as if struck by a giant's fist. Aditya was flung through the turning water, spinning end over end. The once still abyss was now a maelstrom, clouds of black silt and shards of coral whipping past him like shrapnel. The red glow bled into every direction, blotting out the faint greens of the Queen's domain. His ears popped painfully as pressure shifted in violent bursts, the very currents themselves warring against each other. Somewhere far below, he felt the creature rise, a force so massive it seemed to displace the sea itself. He glimpsed it only in flashes through the chaos, its fins stretching outward like walls of living shadow, its body twisting with the slow, terrible grace of something that had waited far too long to move. Every motion sent shockwaves up through the water, tearing apart pillars of coral and scattering entire schools of glowing fish. Aditya fought to control his movement, kicking desperately to avoid the jagged debris. He could barely tell up from down until a sudden burst of blinding green light cut through the red, and he knew she was still here. The queen appeared above him, her form distorted by the currents, but no less terrible for it. Her gown lashed in the water like living kelp, her hair a storm around her face. Gone was the poised regality. Now her expression was carved from rage itself. "You dare?" The words cracked through his skull, each syllable shaking the marrow in his bones. She extended her arms, and from her fingers shot streams of emerald energy, searing through the water toward him. Aditya twisted away just in time, feeling the heat of it, even here in the depths. Behind him, the molten eye opened fully, wider than before, its golden fire cutting across the chaos. The creature's voice rumbled through every current. "She cannot hold this ocean anymore." The red light pulsed faster, each throb sending a surge that pushed Aditya upward. The queen snarled and dove after him, her emerald light clashing against the crimson waves in violent bursts. The very water seemed to scream, alive with the clash of their powers. Aditya realized with horror that he was now caught between them, prey in the path of two gods. The current seized him suddenly, dragging him toward the surface with a speed that made his chest feel as if it would burst. Through the blur, he saw fragments of the queen's palace breaking apart, towers collapsing into spirals of sand and shattered shell. Creatures fled in every direction, some screaming, others simply vanishing into the dark. The molten eye stayed fixed on him until a depth swallowed it once more, its final whisper curling through his mind. "Find her before I do." The surface came like a blow. He erupted into the moonlight night, gasping, waves tossing him like a rag doll. The shoreline of Parangtritis lay ahead, but it was not the same as when he left. Fires burned along the coast and strange shadows moved in the water just offshore. The storm that raged above mirrored the one below, lightning forking across the sky as if the heavens themselves had joined the war. Somewhere in that chaos, Listari was waiting or running, and Aditya, choking on seawater and fear, began to swim. Listari stood at the edge of the burning shoreline, her bare feet sinking into the wet sand. The night wind was thick with salt and smoke, the air punctuated by the crackle of flames devouring fishing huts. Behind her, villagers shouted and ran, some carrying children, others dragging bundles of whatever they could save. Yet she could not move. Something deep inside told her that Adityan was close, closer than he had been since the sea took her. But along with that certainty came another colder truth. Something else had followed him back. The waves before her churned unnaturally, their white foam laced with streaks of red that glowed faintly beneath the moonlight. She had seen that color before, in a place she had tried to forget. A faint tremor passed through the ground beneath her feet, and she remembered the queen's warning whispered into her ear the night she was taken. "If the red light rises, run from the shore and never look back." But she didn't run. Her eyes searched the chaos of the waves, straining for a glimpse of him. Her heartbeat quickened, not from fear, but from the dread of what she might see. A shout came from the left. Mbao the Ross was making her way across the beach, her frame stooped, but her stride unshaken. Her hair had come loose from its knot, whipping wildly in the wind. "Child," she called, her voice somehow cutting through the roar of the surf. "Get away from the water! The binding has been broken!" The old woman's eyes flashed with something Listari had never seen before, real fear. She reached for Listari's arm, but Listari pulled away, scanning the waves again. "He's there," she said, almost to herself. "I can feel him." Then she saw him, Aditya's head
breaking the surface just beyond the first line of breakers, his arms thrashing against the pull of the tide. Relief slammed into her chest, but it lasted only a heartbeat. For behind him, the water swelled into a towering shape, black against the storm-lit sky. It was no wave, it was the shadow of something immense, its fins cutting the surface like jagged cliffs, its golden eye glowing, even through the storm's fury. The sight stole her breath, the memory of that gaze clawing its way back from the abyss of her mind. The villagers saw it too. Screams rippled across the beach, and people fled inland, some tripping in the dark, others abandoning their possessions where they fell. Umbal Laras tightened her grip on Lestari's arm. "If he's brought that thing here, we have no time," she hissed. "We must leave before it sets foot on land." Lestari shook her head violently, her eyes locked on Aditya. "I'm not leaving him," she shouted over the wind, though her voice was almost drowned by the rumble growing from the sea, a sound like a mountain splitting open. The golden eye tilted, fixing on the shore, and the tremor beneath the sand grew into a steady quake. Lightning split the sky, revealing for an instant the full enormity of the creature behind Aditya, its chains gone, its body stretching farther than her vision could follow. In that moment, Lestari realized the Queen's warning had not been to save her, but to keep her from ever seeing what was coming. And now, whatever bargain Aditya had struck below the waves was about to arrive on the shore of Parangtritis.
Aditya's lungs burned as he fought the final stretch toward the shore, every wave slamming into him like a wall of stone. The storm howled overhead, lightning igniting the sky in jagged bursts. Behind him, the sea heaved upward as if some colossal beast were pushing against its surface from below. His muscles screamed, but the sight of Lestari on the beach kept his arms moving, kept his head above the boiling water. Each time he glanced over his shoulder, the golden eye was closer, its gaze unwavering, its intent unreadable. The creature reached with a roar that silenced the wind. Its massive form rose from the sea like a black fortress, scales glistening with crimson light, each breath sending ripples across the storm-lashed water. Chains hung in tatters from its limbs, swaying and sparking with unnatural energy. The impact of its emergence sent a wave hurtling toward the beach, scattering villagers like leaves in a gale. Aditya felt the current seize him, threatening to drag him back toward the abyss he had barely escaped. Lestari tore herself free from Baluras's grip and plunged into the shallows, the cold biting into her bones. "Aditya!" she screamed, her voice nearly lost to the thunder. He heard her, he was sure he did, but he also heard something else. A whisper, low and honeyed, threading through the chaos. The Queen's voice, curling into his thoughts like smoke. "You freed him, but you still belong to me. Let her go, and I will spare your land." Her form shimmered in the rain just beyond the creature, her green gown flowing, though no wind touched it. Aditya's feet touched sand, but the retreating water pulled him with desperate force. Lestari reached him, grasping his wrist with both hands, her nails biting into his skin. For a heartbeat, their eyes locked, the world narrowing to just the two of them. Then a shadow fell over them both, and they turned to see the creature looming above the breakers, its mouth opening in a slow, terrible grin filled with rows of teeth like polished stone. The golden eye shifted between them, and a deep voice rolled out over the storm. "She is mine. He is mine. The sea remembers." The Queen stepped forward, her bare feet walking on the surface of the waves as if they were solid glass. Her gaze locked on the creature. Not anymore. The sea between them exploded into a wall of energy, emerald clashing with crimson, each blast illuminating the shoreline in pulses of light.
The air itself seemed to warp under the pressure, bending sound and space. Aditya shoved Alistari toward the beach, but she clung to him. "If you go back in there, you'll never come out again," she cried. But he was already turning, the dagger still in his hand. With a roar that matched the storm, Aditya hurled himself toward the line where queen and creature clashed. Lightning crowned the horizon as his feet left the shallows, the world a blur of red and green. Whether he meant to strike one or both, even he didn't know. But the instant his blade touched the light, the sea erupted. Water, wind, and darkness consumed them, swallowing the shore, the fires, and the screams, and one crushing wave. When the storm passed at dawn, the beach was empty, the sea calm, and only a single silver chain lay tangled in the sand.